My name is Daniel. I'm the curator and program and booking manager of Aether, and I'm also DJ resident at City Matinee and one of the founder of the Soaking Techno series. And we have here Clémence Maillard, labor manager at Cercle Odyssey and Cercle Records, education background with ESS EC Masters Music in Business, and passion for vinyl and electronic music. Chris Richards, 20 years of experience in electronic music industry, background in creative and business, studio, mix engineer and producer, former booking agent at A&R Global Distribution Rights, and the label manager, founder of Parasol Artist, runs Achille Music, which offers consultation on artist development, ad campaign and tour marketing. And Gabriel Szatan, editor at Resident Advisor, leading a global editorial and content team, formerly host and senior curator at Boiler Room, and published across at platforms like Pitchfork, The Guardian, BBC Radio 1, DJ Mag, RBMA, Dazed, and NTS, and more. So in the first panel, we're going to talk about artist development and promotion. What do you think, or how an artist can be developed nowadays? How long does it take for an artist to be like fully developed? What kind of investment is it required?
I'll just say one thing about fully developed. I think development is like an eternal process. I know that's a really woolly answer, but I think full development happens when you die. Like, you just keep going and you keep expanding from there. I think obviously getting to a point where you are ready to be marketed or like ready for wider saturation is one thing. But yeah, I would just say that I don't think development ever really stops.
I very much agree with this.
Thanks.
I think what I'll say at this juncture is maybe regardless of all of the changes in the industry and the way that things work or don't work and develop and augment over time, the most important thing with development, in my perspective, has always been and continues to be, how can you interact directly with your audience and build a direct communication with them over time? So we can get swept up into these ideas, like if I'm with this label or I'm with this company, I'll get exposed to such a large amount of people. And this, of course, does help, but nothing helps more than being in control of your own direct-to-fan communication and building this little by little by little by little over time. This is what I tend to focus on a lot with my management clients, and assisting on this type of push. And over years, we find that this has a great amount of impact comparatively to other things. So I'll just put that in for now.
100% aligned on what the guy said. I don't have anything to say more.
What do you think nowadays? What is very important platforms and tools, for example, like social media? We see, I think, nowadays quite a lot, since like Instagram, TikTok, Facebook. What can be like good advertise? Let's start maybe just with that.
I can go first. Let's say that the short form platforms are still major leaders, and I think it's really important to still be in the improvement mode on these platforms, but still major radios on the electronic scene is really important to work on. It's all about who's playing your track, which medias, which DJs, who you're talking to. So I think if I should select only a few platforms, I'd say short form platforms and classic radios.
Just on that note, in terms of creating your own content or marketing yourself through your own channels, I think having a grasp of what your audience looks like and what they might be most interested in is really useful. For example, you don't necessarily need to be doing like a circle style, super aesthetic video on the top of a temple if you're making music that doesn't really fit that, or like you're not doing a live performance. I think that might be potentially overdoing it at the start. And I think pushing it through doing mixes for the right DJ mix series that fit your kind of music, or doing live performances, or getting like a residency at a concert hall that fits your background is probably a better first step. And from there you can build. But I think the amount of choices available to you as like an early developing artist, you don't need to be spending thousands and thousands building like a really beautiful visual portfolio if your audience might find that a little extra or a little over the top. So trying to fit into the right channels that would really work and like sell you to an audience that are going to back you for a long time is just quite an intelligent way to go about it, I think.
I think also just maybe pointing out that more important than having a primary tool that you've chosen to use, whether that's radio or whether that's advertising or whether that's social media, what's important is that you have a strategy that leads people from discovery into a relationship point in which they are opting into something that remains an ongoing experience with you, so that you can capture them into fans and hopefully eventually customers, if we want to call them this. So if you're pushing things through a label or through radio or these traditional ends, what does that mean, and how are you going to retarget or capture those people and bring them into an environment where they become permanently retargetable? Same thing if you're using social media. It's not just about getting followers on Instagram. What are you doing with those followers? How are you using the followers on Instagram to fold into a more controllable environment where you can build their interest over time and feed them additional content and get them plugged into who you are and what you're doing? So I like to think about things more long term and say, pick whatever you want to pick. Pick what feels natural for you in regards to what platform you're using to develop your audience, but make sure you have a plan that leads past just discovery. Otherwise, you're in this endless loop of, I put this thing out and all these people heard it, I think. And that's the end of that. And now I put out another thing and I think a bunch of people heard that. You know, what is the plan to get them re-listening, getting plugged into additional content, etc.?
Is there a national phrase similar to the UK phrase which says a house built on sand? Do you know that? Do you have something similar?
Yes.
So basically, I think to riff off what you're saying, you could have like a hit that goes viral for reasons outside of your control. And if that's all that people know you for, and you don't build those relationships, or you don't have a strategy to grow that starting point, you are going to end up getting washed out by all the competition in the field. Relationships, having someone in your corner, having a small but important and like valid audience backing you and turning up to every show, or the support of a management team or a label that really truly is going to push you over multiple records, is probably more important than having one breakout moment that then becomes your one calling card, because that diminishes over time, I think, without someone to keep pushing you and getting you into the right rooms, into right conversations, or in front of the right pair of ears.
If I may add something, I think also strategies are meant to evolve in time, and we should not be, the industry and the talented musicians around us in this scene should not be afraid to test things, because at first, when you made the parallel with Cercle. When Derek created Cercle, it was just live streams on Facebook, and it didn't work that much until he just tried and he contacted the Eiffel Tower to do something there, and they were crazy and they said yes, and we had to deliver and we organized something there. So it's just a matter of how you want to succeed, not in like the success story mode, but how you want your music to be understood, how you want it to travel, and just try to test different things, new collaboration, new ways to communicate, and new partners also, I think.
I would jump back for a second to the radio part, because I feel, and I think also everyone feels it in Hungary, that we don't really have like electronic music focused radio, or like I feel electronic music is barely on the visual like in national radio. So what do you think, for example, to a Hungarian DJ or producer or electronic music artist, what can be a good step to step out from the like Hungarian borders and try to make it to some international or some other national radio?
I think at first it might be interesting to contact web radios, such as small organization, association, collectives that are that have created web radios. It can be pretty small. I help an artist on his management right now, and this is what we are doing right now, contacting web radios, contacting radios from clubs as well. I think you can start very small and just build a name in this audience. And yeah, I think it's just something that people really don't think about that much, but it's still very interesting because these people has their audience and a very loyal one.
We were talking about it before we came on stage. Obviously, in England, we're very lucky that we have the BBC that has a certain amount of homegrown artists that it needs the platform, and it has about 6 different channels. And from what I understand, that obviously there's no parallel here, and probably in very few countries there's any level of parallel. So radio, as it existed in the 1990s, might feel too archaic. Just like you said, I think seeing a smaller coalition of local stations in other cities and territories that have a small, vibrant underground that know what they like and can back it is probably of more value than getting one play at 2 a.m. on a mainstream radio station, which I don't think for many people here is going to be the goal. But yeah, getting a portfolio of different people and hitting different listeners is going to be of more long-term value than that one for people driving their car going to work. Like, it's just not what's going to get you over the line in your career, I think.
Thank you. How big part does advertising play nowadays in artist promotion and artist development? Like, can be classical advertisement on different platforms, PRs.
For me, it's one of the predominant marketing strategies right now in the context of social media. But again, it's really about the quality of the plan and the making sure that if you have an advertising strategy, it's not short term, it's long term. It's not about, okay, we put this content up and so we're just going to boost this post or run this engagement ad. And then the next thing is another engagement ad. The next thing's another engagement ad. There needs to be something funneling over time and compounding back to the audience that you are originally hitting that engages people to the point that they're able to then take a step that might be a follow or an opt-in or whatnot. So just if you can survive me being super nerdy for like 1 minute, like an example of that is we often are using video view campaign funnels where you're using actually long form content on Instagram Reels, which is usually a short form content location, and you can retarget audiences that are based on percentage of the video viewed. So rather than just saying, okay, we're going to push this out and everyone's going to see this, and that's the end of that strategy, the strategy is we push out video 1. Everyone who watches at least 50% of that, which might be up to 30 seconds, which is a super long time on Instagram to engage, you can assume is interested. That queues up a new piece of content that they see. That queues up another piece of content that they see, and you funnel them through several stages until then you start talking about opting in or do this or leave the platform and go do this to get additional content or whatnot. And this for me is really helpful when a lot of the traditional marketing strategies right now are feeling a little bit uncertain in the impact. It used to be things like spending a lot of money on press campaigns had a really obvious value. We're in a period of time right now where we're struggling to measure the value of them. So putting money into things that are developing compoundable retargeting audiences it's a very, very valuable thing right now, especially because they can be reused over time and can be reused in the context of a new strategy if things change again.
If you don't have a strategy that's that targeted and intelligent, I would say, particularly at this level, I don't think advertising is a great use of money. There's a economic phenomenon known as overchoice. If you go to a supermarket and there's 70 types of ketchup, you'll go for the one that you know because you can't get shocked by the amount out there. I don't think spending money on advertising will build you a new customer base if they're just going to default back to what they want already. I think what we're talking about is kind of like a 21st century version of advertising where like you're building your own portfolio, you're putting out your story and your music into the world, and that is a more a better ROI on the money that you're spending rather than trying to target people who may just see it and, like you say, scroll on within half a second, let alone 30 seconds. When you're getting to a level of like a massive club or a massive record label, you're pushing out like an album that you've developed for 2 years, different conversation. But at this level, I don't think it's a terrific use of money.
My next 3 questions would be to Clémence, but of course you guys also feel free to answer if you feel like, and if you have a different opinion, if you're agreeing. We already talked about it actually during during our meal. What kind of release strategy do you see like useful in 2025?
I think first thing first, establishing a strategy, as you said earlier, is important, and keeping flexibility, because sometimes you can have your strategy plan and there's opportunities, there's people playing your track, there's medias you couldn't even think about that are interested in, and you have to be flexible and agile. I think what is important is the storytelling, because we have massive and multiple artist releases every day, and we're a bit drawn sometimes. And I feel the only thing that really matters for the public, as far as I'm not mistaken, would be the person who's behind the music. So the artist, who's the artist, who is he like, or what does she likes to do in her free time, what is the message, what is her story. So I think it's really important to get the focus on the music and the person, and also to have different ways of communicating on socials. You cannot just have one video and you put the same video on TikTok, YouTube, and Instagram. It would just be not relevant. I think that you have to understand your community and you have to target your platforms. You don't need to be everywhere. You should just target some key platforms that are interesting for you, where you see you have response, and just push your push your limits in terms of content, in terms of creativity. I definitely advise some artists to just concentrate all their efforts on 1 or 2 platforms and stay consistent, and add a lot of content and a lot of behind the scenes, behind the track stories, how they composed it, how the public is reacting when they're playing it. More focus on the artists and the story behind.
What do you think, like, if someone wants to release, for example, 4 EPs with 4 tracks in it during a year, which is better, like releasing 4 EPs or releasing everything as a single, like every second week or every week? Or do you think if there is some difference in between?
It's hard. It's hard because we're in the electronic music scene, so we're very used to single releases. Also, I'm a label working on single releases. But in terms of what you can create, you can indeed create something bigger in terms of storytelling with a project. Small EP or an album is just something bigger than just a single release. And in terms of let's be fully transparent, in terms of what the DSPs wants, like Spotify, Apple, and also the public, they need to get a better vision on what the artist wants, where he wants to go, how he composed this track. And if it's, I feel sometimes that when it's just one track that is just out there for no reason, sometimes it can be tricky. Whereas I'd say that EPs might be interesting in terms of how you will release all the singles, what type of content you can create around these releases, and also you have several momentum of communication, whereas with a single you can have, let's say, 1, 2, or 3 momentums, but it's difficult to have like 10 momentums of communication with just single releases.
When I worked at a streaming company, I learned about a technique called a waterfall release. What that means is you release a single, and then you release the next single the next month with the B-side of the previous single. Then you release the third single, and you have 2 B-sides, which are the 2 previous singles. So you're dropping it in a way that your audience is following along, thinking song by song, but what you're doing is you're building out the EP in real time. So when it's finished, you've technically released 4 singles as well as an EP. People that find it in 5 years' time will see it as an EP, but your audience will feel like they're being served something new every few weeks, and that usually is really good for stats. If you come to an EP, track number 1 on an EP gets like 90% of the plays the majority of the time. So you could build the most creative world that you've ever thought of, but most people are only going to check in for that first song. So sometimes, like you were saying, the effort outweighs the audience attention span. I think doing a creative strategy like that is a good way to hit 2 different markets. Some people prefer long form, some people prefer quick hits, and they go back to the playlist they've already built. Unfortunately, sometimes it's just a dice roll. Like, especially streaming, the mysteries of Spotify and Apple playlisting can be so make or break, and it feels like it's determined by a god in the clouds. It's really frustrating. Yeah, I wouldn't say that 2 EPs a year is any better or worse than 4 singles. It just depends what your audience is up for, and meeting them where they want their music and how they like it. It's not a one size fits all approach, I guess.
Which platform, all of you, which do you think is most important nowadays for releases? Because we mentioned Spotify, we mentioned Apple Music. I don't know if you have any preferences, or what do you experience? Does it matter if you're, I mean, of course it matters, but how much it matters, for example, if a release gets into different kind of playlist? For example, Spotify has also this algorithm-based release radar as well, and also there are like millions of playlists pushing the new releases. And there, for example, if I'm correct, most of the playlists only take in tracks which are released on Fridays.
If you make a certain type of electronica that's really rhythmic and really melodic, and there's a playlist that has 800,000 followers specifically for that thing, and it's like Floating Points, Caribou, Fortet, Gold Panda, and you know you want to go there, probably trying to get in touch with that person and sending them like constantly being like, I fit this, it will work really well, it matches, it's got the exact same pace, it's got the same feeling, put me on this playlist. That will probably end up delivering a better chance of crossover than just putting something on Instagram all the time. Obviously, like you said, you should be doing both, but I think trying to locate with like laser precision the playlist that could get you to the ears of most people that are going to be your most likely fans, sometimes you just have to bang on that door all the time, and it can be a make or break. I think just putting stuff up on streaming services and assuming that the algorithm will do it for you, that's too big of a risk. It's not going to pay off for most people, but trying to be really selective and get that relationship early doors, even if it goes nowhere for the first 4 or 5 tries, if you know it's going to click, and you know that if someone gives you 7 minutes shot, it's worth hammering it. That's a really specific example, but it's better than just like putting it out and hoping that fate will do the rest.
Thank you. Also, there's some potential to reach some UGC playlists, user-generated playlist. I mean, if you're a growing artist, you still have a small audience, maybe you will not target the biggest playlist on Spotify, let's say, but there is some doors to open and to knock at is the generated playlists by users, people that are curating playlists. these guys or these girls, of course, has their names and their contact in their bios, and it might be interesting sometimes to reach out to these people because they know how to create playlists that brings new audience and saves and streams. And I think this is something that we need to push a bit more.
I think the only thing I'll add is I would hesitate to really frame it in like which platform is most important to pay attention to, because this can change at any moment. So we could tell you something today and 6 months from now it will be meaningless. I think approaching releases, you should always try to understand the best approach to all of the primary DSPs, because there's actually not a lot of controllable points in which we can ingest drivers or marketing elements into them. So it's not that much work to focus on 5 or 6 in a way that's useful. Spotify historically has always been the most controllable result because they give us more tools in which we can interact with their editorial department and marketing departments. But, you know, Amazon, you can pitch now in Amazon for Artist Backend. Most distributors now can pitch to playlists in YouTube. Full track length content on YouTube ingests into a very different space and network than pushing stuff to editorials on Apple and Spotify. So if you can like kind of cover 5 or 6 of them and just understand the checkbox and go through those motions with your distributor for getting all the drivers in place, using Spotify's tools that you have access to in your own backend, I feel like you can spread a pretty wide focus without it feeling too overwhelming. And then you don't really know like where your audience is going to start building. It might come from a place that you didn't think it was going to.
And let's not forget local stores such as Ngami working on Middle East, Boomplay, Boombox. There's major DSP stores that are not that much recognized in Europe, let's say, but that are very renowned in some local territories. And I think there's a huge gap to fill here by contacting them.
Thanks. So Clémence, how do you work together with artists, and how far are you planning with your releases, or just like planning with your artist? And what do you think? How is your label different from other labels?
Oof, tough one. Well, I'm working on very different verticals with artists because Cercle has been known for the events. So when we created the label, it was at first to create something bigger that will last in time than just the events. We wanted to have some sort of memories, and we invited the artists that were performing during our Cercle shows to create an exclusive track that were entitled by the name of the location. The cover was a picture of the location. So we had this strong storytelling, and well, it did go pretty well. And we decided to expand the record activity by just signing releases with artists we wanted to work with, sorry. And now most of all Cercle events are linked to Cercle Records releases. So basically what we usually do, we have 2 types of situation. When we have an event, Cercle OTC, Cercle Festival, Cercle Show, we propose the opportunity to the artist to release a track on the label. Or we can have the situation where artists send us demos and we select it. And then we discuss with them to create the best way to market it. And what makes us different, I'd say that Cercle is is some sort of art creation because we're working on so different verticals. We have a travel agency, we have a record label, we have a festival. We're now doing tours, so we're working on very different verticals on the cultural scene. And I think this is what can be attracting for new artists to work with us.
Thanks. Chris, we already talked about I think, or everyone, we talked about almost every possible tool what can be effective for artist development, but what do you think if you can maybe sum up the most effective ones?
I feel like this is a very challenging thing to speak to in sort of like a homogenous bubble. Like the implication is that the approach would be the same from artist to artist to artist, which I kind of strictly don't believe. So I really feel like customization to your approach and strategy really needs to speak to who you are as an artist, what your goals are, what you've chosen in regards to the route to get to those goals. So like from an artist manager perspective, the sort of developmental strategies that we have in place across my clients are completely different client to client to client. So I guess I would say, to answer your question best, the best tool is to have someone who believes in you, that understands strategy in the music industry, to help you develop a concrete plan and figure out what team members need pulled in to execute that plan. I'm going to leave it at that.
So if it's different by artist, is there, and if there is, then what is the like fundamental rule what needs to be followed all the time, which can be like same for everyone?
My avoidance has been disrupted. This really changes, I think, depending on if you're an artist that's, let's say you're an artist that's focused on music releases and wanting to build an environment that is really based around media, as opposed to an artist who is really building a career oriented around live and live touring, and that being your setup. These are completely different directions. I think if I was to speak to an artist that is building from the context of media, I would lean a lot on what was said earlier about storytelling, figuring out what you can offer to your audience that really feels genuine, feels personal, develops an emotional relationship with them through your art. And if you're building through touring, then you're talking about a totally different subset of tools, which are going to be very heavily oriented around advertising, around social media, around having a relationship with a booking agent. So again, it's a little bit of a struggle, I think, for me to say, to give you like a concrete, universal answer.
Okay, what is the toolkit what you personally are using when you are working with an artist? Just like narrowing it down.
Okay, I'll use one artist as an example. Maybe this will help. Okay, so if we were to speak of Corolla Dust as just an example. So this is an artist that's very middle of the road, where we are both approaching like traditional cyclical label releases in connection with building a touring brand for them. We are leaning on traditional partners like label infrastructure, PR, radio, to saturate that side of things while doing community development on our side, which is the tool that I already mentioned earlier, I like to use the most, to get people more oriented into receiving sort of a non-public backdoor storytelling, backdoor assets and information that you can't get just on the social media. So we're using a lot of advertising funnels to push people into opting in for new content that gets them things. This is also how they get access to sort of limited edition merch elements. On the tour side, this is how they get access to potential VIP moments or meet and greet situations or opt-ins that allow them to build a slightly more personalized setup. So since I can't escape this question, I will go back to saying direct to fan communication is my primary tool.
Thank you. Gabriel, how do you select which artist to cover?
In the press.
Yes. Because I think also the platforms are like very useful, like kits for artists. So how can, for example, someone get into your site?
Do you want to know the strategy of how you can get press or how you can mark yourself in the press? Because there's two different ways to go about it.
Let's go both.
Okay, cool. Just to start off with a little bit of background about how decimated or damaged the press market is. 10 years ago, for electronic music, you had Resident Advisor, Fact, Pitchfork, Accelerator, multiple local platforms. You had electronic beats in multiple markets. You had Vice in multiple markets. And almost all of these have gone. And it shrunk down to a very small pool of, I guess, Pitchfork and Resident Advisor are two of the more likely places to cover electronic music. But even then, because electronic music has become more friendly towards pop music, you're now in the room with Bjork and Charlie XCX, whereas previously you'd be in the room with Dixon. Like, it's a very different market. No shade to Dixon. What this means is there's only a very limited amount of space for big international publication to pick up an artist outside of the main power centers of New York, London, Berlin, Tokyo, Paris. In the last year, Pitchfork has laid off 50% of its staff, and Resident Advisor, we're now running less features than we used to because we're doing more mixes, more video content. So you've basically taken this big wide world of press and shrunk it down to a really, really, really small nub. What that means is, you used the phrase earlier about drowning. I get hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of emails a week, not just about like, can you write about me, or can you take time to listen to my artist, but also, hey, there's a new Marcel Detman album in 6 weeks. Do you want to go out and interview him? So you've got this ocean of work to do. I listen to less music as an editor than I did when I was a freelancer because there simply isn't enough time. That's a big, long, winding road to say the opportunities for press are really narrow, and you have to make an incredibly effective pitch to get a journalist that you like or a media platform that you're interested in to take the time out of their schedule to sit and listen to you. Appreciate the music, appreciate the context, appreciate where you're coming from, and then they'll make an investment on covering you. The odds are pretty narrow at this point because the media landscape is just so damaged. So what I like to tell artists to do now is, rather than trying to go for a big Q&A or a feature, maybe you'll get one in DJ Mag or Mix Mag, but it's unlikely. Try and sell yourself through a content-based channel, i.e., most mixes or video series come with a small Q&A. It's probably better for you, given the limited attention span of music listeners as well as the media, to sell yourself musically and then add a little bit of extra context in the Q&A, rather than trying to imagine you'll get printed in Mixmag. Ultimately, there might be two Mixmag journalists who are just going to talk to their friends in London in a pub. That's just the state of play. Knowing the journalists that have an affinity or a warmth for the sound that you want to make is really important. A lot of people who got laid off from Pitchfork or Vice now run really effective newsletters that can reach 16,000 people. It might not be the same range as Pitchfork, but it's 16,000 people who really love the thing that you do. And like we were talking about earlier, it's better to have a small, engaged fan base at the start rather than trying to throw the net into the sea and catch loads of different fish. Single artists who are on the rise are probably better served being in a bigger story. So if you are a resident or a familiar face at a club, go and canvas 4 or 5 of the other artists in your community and try and pitch together. Saying that you're part of a movement, or saying that you're part of something larger than just yourself. It might not be what you want out of, you believe your art is brilliant and you want people to listen to it, but you're much, much, much more likely to get picked up by the international press if there's like a wider story that you can be pulled up within. It's more likely that RA or Pitchfork or Mixmag will go to somewhere like Hungary or Georgia or Poland and be like, there's a movement happening here, here are the key players, rather than being like, here's one person that I really like in the city, if that makes sense. Yeah, I mean, we've been saying it all along, it's an evolving landscape. I wish we could sit here and talk for an hour about how to make your music as good as possible, how to make it as emotionally resonant and exciting and pulse racing. But in 2025, you have to be multi-content, marketing, advertising, social strategist as much as you have to be a creator. Does that suck? Yes. Is that the way it is? Also, yes. So unfortunately, you have to kind of take the punch on the chin and be incredibly creative with how you get that foot in the door. And when the foot is in the door, people are going to start engaging with you, and that's when you really start to build more attention, more love for your craft. But unfortunately, 95 out of 100 feet don't get in the door purely because they think the music will speak for itself. I hate to say it, the landscape's just a little bit too crunched for that at the moment. That was a long answer. I don't think I really said anything of importance.
Do you think that there is that nowadays is there like more important to have like written like published content about an artist, or is it more important to have like video content published on an artist? For example, electronic beats, as you mentioned, this kind of totally changed, especially the German one mostly changed into video content based. As until, for example, Resident Advisor, DJ Mag, they stayed like published like written.
Not everyone is photogenic and not everyone feels comfortable in front of a camera. However, if you're 23, you're much, much, much more likely to catch on to someone by scrolling, stopping, scrolling back and watching something than you are clicking on something and reading it the whole way through. So as a published writer, it's like stabbing myself in the heart, but definitely go for video first unless you think your story is incredibly unique and would make a really good read. That can come in time. I think short form, compelling, quick, digestible content is the way to go at this level. And then from there you can develop. But the days of publications writing 700 words about someone's debut EP, they're not over, but it's on the way out. I think video content, speaking about yourself, doing it in a way that grabs the audience and brings them towards you, right now is the better strategy. And that doesn't have to be cheap, it doesn't have to be silly, it can still be editorial and meaningful and get your story across. It's just probably the way that the market is responding at the moment. Long form features can come when you've got 5 albums and there's like a much bigger roller coaster rise and fall to tell. If you're 23 and you're just getting out in the market, I wouldn't see that as the priority right now.
Do you see changes in the number of the readers since there are like video contents nowadays, like comparing to, for example, 2024 and 2014?
Yeah, undeniably. The readership for our big stories, for our cover stories, for our art DJing is up, but for smaller artists it's down. But breakout 2-minute Instagram content for younger artists is way up, but for bigger artists it's actually down. What that means is a legacy media follower, if you're 35 or 40 and there's something by, I don't know, let's say Dixon again, you might have spent 10 years reading music magazines and you might want to read the new Mixmag cover with Dixon. But putting Dixon in front of a camera to shuffle a little bit awkwardly before his gig in Ibiza, like, it's not very interesting because he's old. No offense.
The Electronic Beats one was actually a cute one. He had just a video at Electronic Beats, and that was actually quite nice one.
It's on the right. I feel like Dixon's going to put out a hit on me. I'm going to get like a knock on the door for some mafia. But,
yeah, I'm personally a Dixon fan. So
readership, just like we've been saying all along, and these feel like really evasive answers, but it's simply the truth. There is no one fits all strategy when it comes to promotion, when it comes to label activations, when it comes to press. I would say that in the current media climate, understanding where you might come across best. If you are an incredibly gifted storyteller and you need the extra space, don't try and make it work in 45 seconds. If you're really funny and witty and snappy and you can bring people in, probably go for that. And don't pretend that you're going to become a philosopher as soon as someone puts a dictaphone in front of you.
Do you see changes nowadays of the percentage of young audience who are reading and the older audience, or it's kind of the same like 10 years ago? So like same amount of young people and old people are reading age-wise?
In the scene or in terms of press?
In terms of press, in the scene.
I think post-pandemic, there was a massive wave of really young talent who were all suddenly getting really big, and it felt fresh. And now I think the pendulum has swung back a little bit. Obviously, Resident Advisor is very underground. Well, not very, but like compared to some bigger publications, we don't focus on kind of music or like Ibiza that much. We're focusing on a smaller piece of the pie. I think young artists who became social media superstars wore out their welcome a little bit in the last year. Like they might be now playing Coachella or Exit or whatever. We don't need to be covering that as much. So I think older artists who've played the long game and made like a really unique sound and made like a catalogue that is strong and has lasted the test of time, that's where I'm gravitating as an editor, and that's the story that appeals to me. But you're not going to put actress or someone who's been doing it for like 15 years in front of a camera in the same way. It's an there's a whole bundle of problems in music media. One of them is familiarity, another is ageism. But I think that artists who have like pedigree or heritage or veterans can be served really well in print. I just don't think they should be chasing TikTok virality in the same way that Horse Girl or VGSS is. Yeah.
How do you see the role of online magazine for electronic music? Role of you?
Why doesn't
Like
someone else,
nowadays,
someone else
especially.
not me talk for a second?
I mean, it's a huge priority for us also to discuss with various type of media, such as online magazine, but also pages that are curating video content, such as you were mentioning that earlier. So I think the wider you reach, the better it is. So it's also very interesting, as I was saying with web radio, to reach new audience that are maybe more loyal with small medias. And as we're not only working with big artists, also in terms of releases, it's important to focus on this type of medias because we know that we might have a place, because as you were mentioning, there is no that much place for newcomers or new artists in the big medias. And to be honest, it might not be the most interesting audience for newcomers. So yeah, it's a huge target for us, small medias.
Yeah, I think targeting these types of opportunities is always useful. The reason I would say they're useful maybe feels different now than I would have said 10 years ago, where 10 years ago, print coverage, online magazine coverage, all of these things, I feel like I could see metrics that seemed to apply more directly to sales, for example, than I would say that now. But the most important part about these moments, I think, are demonstrating to the community and your fan base that there are other people also interested and also sort of approving of something they're excited about, because humans are very social, and from a psychological perspective, we seem to huddle around things that have momentum in regards to what other people are also excited about. So there is this sort of like badge, I would say, that comes with having these moments of coverage that can communicate to people that, hey, I'm interested in this. Oh, I saw someone else also is interested in it. So now I have permission to really tell people I'm interested in it, if that makes sense. So, yeah.
Just on the note of, I guess, visibility of showing that other people have backed you, this is more of a DJ specific qualm than like a live artist. But if you listen on SoundCloud or Spotify or wherever and you hear 20 artists that you really, really like and think that they are likely to play your music in their sets, if they play an 8-hour set in a club, start to finish, that's a lot of music, and the first 2 hours is often like testing things out. Hit them up, be like, I really like your sound, I've followed you for years, I think this would slot really well into your opening or closing. Or maybe you play it on NTS, or maybe you put in a mix for like Hate or Raw, or like all the different channels. Getting that badge, like you said, can be really useful, because then you can say, my music has been backed by XYZ. You can then take that to like a small label in one of these big power cities and say, hey, I'm on the rise. I've been supported by XYZ. what do you think about releasing a digital 2-tracker on Bandcamp? That goes out, and then you can go up to a radio station like an NTS and say, hey, I've been supported by this DJ, I've been supported by that record label, I play in this city, this is my community, this is the music I make, can I get an hour on the radio? And very quickly you build these building blocks into something that looks like a professional CV. That might be more worth than going out and trying to sell yourself to the big wide world of Instagram out the gate. Because you have all these tiny badges, but someone from a distance will be like, oh, there's like a bit of momentum behind this person. I want to check out more and I want to invest my time in them as well.
Thanks. What are the main criteria for signing an artist nowadays? What do you think? What are the main criteria for signing an artist to a represented agency, company, label?
On our side, I would say that the music that we're working with is always more or less linked to visuals, even though it's not linked to a show or an event. We will try our best to create something out of the music of the artist. So working with the emotion, colors, some words that can get to his or her mind when composing it. So I think the main criteria is to feel huge emotion when hearing this track at first, or maybe the second time, and feeling that this track will be timeless, that if you listen to it in 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, you will get the same butterflies than when you heard it and released it in 2025, for instance.
I think for me, from a very personal perspective, of course, the foundation always has to be that the music is causing me to have an emotional response. Because if I don't feel emotional about the music, then I've already cut myself off at the knees in regards to how hard I'm going to work, how serious I'm taking it. The ideas that develop for me generally come from a place of excitement, not from practicality. So when I get excited about something and emotional, that's when the best work comes out of me. That's not very useful to anyone to hear, but that's is a foundational thing for me. Outside of that, I will just say, like you said earlier, unfortunately, we live in the era where it's very important for artists to be multifaceted and be able to create content for socials in addition to their music and understand a much wider piece of the puzzle and participate in that than it used to be. So it is important for me to feel like that if I'm going to sign an artist, that there is a relationship to all of the pieces of the puzzle that they can participate in. Because if they're just good at one thing and not the rest, unless there's a massive budget that allows us to hire a team of specialists, most likely we're not going to get all of the things done that need to get done to inform a larger strategy and push forward. So I am looking a lot at, how does their music relate to their short form content, relate to the way that they approach socials, the way that they speak and interact with their community, all of those things kind of all at once.
Okay, so we have 5 minutes left about this one. So last question, what advice would you give to an emerging artist taking their first step or trying to take their first step to international stage level? Also, also, for example, I feel Hungary is also a little bit less in the sight of the international communities. So, for example, less than London. Sometimes I feel it's for Hungarian artists, it's harder to take their steps international.
I'd say test things, because now that you don't have an audience or that your audience is still small, you can test many things in terms of content, in terms of music, in terms of how you want your career to evolve. So don't be afraid. I think it's the great moment. And don't try to fit to some trend, because we're seeing it, we're hearing it with the Afro House, the melodic trends. Let's do your music. The rest will come. So test things, don't go into trends, because trends are meant to stay only for a couple, I don't know, years, a couple of times. So it can be very trendy now, and in 5 years, not even one person will be listening to it. So just do your thing, and yeah, just play some music. I mean, artists should play some music, and or work as manager, as label, is to work on the rest. So yeah.
1,000,000%. Step one is be yourself, be creative, be weird, be strange, do stuff people told you you're not supposed to do. All of that is step one. Because if you're just saying, oh, my favorite artist is doing this, and so now I'm just going to try to do the same thing because I think I can make that also, it's not going to end up serving your long-term personal career. You might have this moment where you fit into a bubble and it feels like there's momentum, but that can just go away in half a second. So don't minimize your creativity based around ideas like trends or what someone else is doing. All of the memorable things that I would assume anyways, all of the memorable artists and things that we are really moved by in art is things that sound new, that are fresh, that are different. Those are the moments that like really last over decades. So that's step one. The next thing I'll say is just don't underestimate the value of your home market. It's not all about getting out internationally. If you go to someone in London and you're like, I make great music, will you support me? And you have no demonstration that you've built a community or support locally, you have a much smaller chance of getting that support from them than you would if you've put in the work and demonstrated the results of that work in a smaller bubble first, so that there's a story and a communication to talk to with people externally once you get to that point that you're ready to pitch or take that jump. And there oftentimes it's not a matter of like, well, if I can just get heard in this territory or this territory, things will suddenly be done for me and I'll just be successful. More often than not, artists build slowly and it's a stepping stone. So think home territory, think regionally outside of that, think the next region outside of that. And you can simultaneously be hoping for and pitching for those big moments that might happen. But if you only do that and you don't focus on the slow build, 4 years from now, you might go, shoot, I wish this entire time I was working on the slow build in parallel to hoping for the big magic moment. So focus on both and take your small wins seriously. They're super important.
Yeah, just to riff on what you're saying, I think trying not to model yourself on someone who is successful and trying to follow those footsteps is a really good strategy. But you can apply like a very slight twist on that, where you set yourself like an immediately achievable goal. Someone that I really like is playing at 3 p.m. at a local festival. How exactly did they get there? How long were they doing it for? How many records did they release? Who might be their backer? Be it an agent, be it a manager, be it a label, be it a club. How did they build? Do they have like 2,000 followers? Could I get on a call with them? Could I take them out for a drink when they're in town? Going and building these connections and working out how people who are at an achievable level above you did it and working backwards from there can be really good at clarifying yourself, like the steps that it takes, the slow build, without trying to necessarily say, I'm the next X and I'm going to get there super quickly. It will never work. A better way of doing it is thinking, they took a long, winding road. Here are the little pit stops they had to make. How am I going to use those bits of information and bind them to what I'm doing? Sometimes it will work, sometimes it won't. But saying, I really like this person, they're only just a little bit over the hill, I can see that horizon and I think I could get there in time, will give you a pretty set map of the beginning blueprint of your rise. And if it doesn't work, like we were saying before, switch it up. The whole world is available. That's a double-edged sword. It means that everyone and no one is a potential listener. Unfortunately, sometimes it would take years of chipping away. But ultimately, if you develop your craft, you develop and hone your personality in music while simultaneously getting up the ladder step by step, that alone can kind of put a battery in your back and will help you go further. If you simply say, I'm going to be playing at I'm going to be playing a headline set in Paris in a year's time. I'm going to get there no matter what. Probably set for failure. But if you say it's achievable in 5 years and I'm going to start at home and I'm going to build up really slowly, I'm going to make the right connections and get the right listeners tuned in, probably going to take place.
Thank you so much. Does anyone has question? Then nothing. We're gonna have then 10 minutes break. Someone can confirm it. Yes, 10 minutes break, and then we're gonna go with panel 2 about artist booking. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.